Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday and the 5th of October. You're here at Lunch and Learn. Today, as you know, we advertised, so I'm not going to give a big intro. He's here all the time speaking anyway. Yanik is going to talk today about nutrition and related topics. And so we're going to keep everybody muted to begin with while he does his presentation. And then, Yanik, at what point in time would you like us to open up for Q&A?
Well, once I finish up with the last slide, we can open up.
All righty. So when you get to that slide, and I'll give you a 15-minute warning in case you go a little bit longer.
Okay.
How's
All
that?
right.
All right. Okay, it's all yours. We can see your screen, and Yanik, thanks so much for taking the time to put this presentation together for us, and we're glad to have you here, and it's all yours.
Well, I'm going to talk about a topic which is very important for health, which I call invisible starvation. And the objective of this is to understand what it is, why it's so important to not go into these states of low health and functionality due to these micronutrients which we are lacking, and how we can really navigate our way out of these deficient states. So what does invisible starvation mean? It's pretty much that the body is hungry for these small molecules which we call nutrients. We can't really see them. So if you cut an apple in half, you'll pretty much see the same visual impact, the same something that we cannot distinguish between one that has a lot of vitamins and minerals and one that doesn't. So we start becoming hungry and we start displaying certain behaviors like munchies and chewing and all these different type of observational behaviors because we become deficient. So our brain really requires all these different nutrients. If we don't have it, we don't have them, then we can't think, feel, focus, pay attention, learn, concentrate. Every single performance depends on it. But we can't really, it's like swinging for the piñata while you're blindfolded. You really don't know where it is, and you swing and you might hit it, you might not, and it's really risky to be doing that. So why are they so important? Which is the big why. So they're required so we can transform all the food into energy, into cell structures. The more we have, the broader physiological range we have as to less limitations. So we can, for example, we can think for longer times, and we can really focus, like having a laser focus as opposed to not being able to even concentrate. And these are the foundations for building health, transforming at a cellular level. So building blocks, which are the components that build cells, neurons, plus the transformers, for function. And we also require time to repair and rebuild, different cycles. So you perform, you stop performing. As an example, you eat, you get your nutrients, you sleep, you relax, you meditate, all these different low metabolic demanding performances. Now, what are we starting from? Well, primarily, we're talking about vitamins and minerals. But not only that, there are other food factors like cholesterol, omega-3 fatty acids, certain amino acids, which may not be considered essential, meaning that you need them from outside of your body, but having low levels of them will really dampen your functioning, your brain functioning, and all types of performance. So without one or two minerals, you can't really use oxygen to build. You can't read chromosomes. You can't You can't produce enzymes. You can't use vitamins, amino acids. You can't really even produce or use hormones. So you require all of these minerals so you can have the highest performance. And vitamins, their main functions are pretty much helping out enzymes, which are transformers, the utility part of the cells, antioxidants, because you're oxidizing all the time, you're producing energy. And you also need to protect all those structures and keep and maintain these different types of chemical reactions, transformations at a steady rate. So who's at risk for these deficiencies? Mostly pregnant women, because there is a very high metabolic demand to create another body. Infants and young children, they're growing. They need a lot of components. Endurance athletes, peak performers, you're constantly performing, you're burning, but you're also draining yourself. Elderly people, their processes are slowing down. They don't have enough abundance of these minerals, vitamins, and other food factors. Vegetarians, particularly vegans, they are the most at risk for deficiencies. Food insecure people, socioeconomic or even trends, dieters and smokers, um, they all start lacking these minerals. For example, smokers, smoking will be full of, the tobacco will be full of different heavy metals, which will bind to these minerals. They will reduce your vitamins, like vitamin C, for example, and then you start having more issues. Now, do we have enough to build, repair, and function? Well, no. This has been known at least since 1936. So the alarm has really been sounded for almost, we're talking about almost 90 years now. And it really hasn't been paid attention to. So the soil, the minerals in the soil with which the food grows into, the crops and everything, they really take up these minerals at a quick rate. And right now, the amount of minerals in soil is very, very depleted. So this is an example, of apples, of how much iron an apple had in 1950 and how many apples you would have to eat. This was 2014, so the soil is even more depleted now. Spinach is another example. So look at the quantity of food that you would have to eat. So
Yanik,
why
I'm
is,
just going to interrupt and ask, are your
yes,
slides supposed to be changing?
yes,
Okay, they're not.
they're not. Oh boy. Okay.
So I think you have to manually do it because we still have the invisible starvation. There you go.
Okay. So I'm just gonna, sorry for that. Just gonna go to the previous slides really quickly so you know what you were looking at.
Good idea. They'll be on then on the video.
Okay, yeah, so this is where I talked about the invisible hunger, how we can see those nutrients, really swinging and hit and miss thing to really get those nutrients inside the body. What metabolism, physiology, health, what it all means, what is required for performance, the conditional food factors, the functions, the roles that minerals and vitamins play, people that are high at risk, the congressional hearings about the depletion of minerals in soil, as well as this is where we're at. Thank you, Judy. So farmers are paid in tons and bushels. So the government does not give farmers a tax break or incentive if we get enough essential nutrients, meaning nutrients that the body cannot produce by itself. And we have to get it from food or other forms, like supplementation. This is an example of the ethnobotanical database, and you can just see difference right here between vitamin C, folic acid, boron, cadmium, calcium, all these different minerals, as well as anti-nutrients which bind to those minerals, and how they are very different between where they are taking from and when. So, for example, right here, you can have a sample that has 32 times more vitamin C than another sample. And this is why it is very risky to just count on thinking, you can get everything from food, because you can't. Now, empty food will result in lower functioning of cells, eventually the deterioration of cells and tissue. So that's an example of bone that gets all spongy. It has a lot of bone matrix, but it isn't really filled. And it'll occupy space, and you'll have all these types of issues. Well, this pretty much happens everywhere in the body, depending on the deficiency. So why aren't they in food? Why aren't these nutrients that we need so much in food? Well, first of all, there is an increasing purchasing power worldwide, and people are able to buy more food. More crops are being, cycled through, but all of that leaves the soil much more depleted. So an example of this is that even undernourished children, babies, the food that's being provided, it really doesn't have enough nutrients. And you can have children that are sick even 160 days per year. So this is a typical example of how low nourishment can affect. And you can have this seemingly, healthy dieting child, eating all the foods, but they're just getting sick constantly. So the way that the world works is that, it's a system. And for example, the Saharan desert can blow its dust all the way, and does blow the dust all the way to the Amazon's basin. And that's what fertilizes the basin so that all those plants can grow. And minerals are distributed like veins over the Earth's crust. So it really does depend on where you live. If you're lucky to be in a place where this is a map of North America that is showing selenium levels. And you can just see how it varies so much, and that some parts really do not contain it. So even if you go to a local farmer and get some fresh vegetables, it's not in the soil, so it will not be in the food. So before, in other times, we would have these floods of water that, the natural water cycle of Earth, the rain that would start in a mountain, and it would just go sliding down and take all the minerals from rocks, which we call silt. And then you would get these floods all over the land, and it would flood the crops, but that would nourish the soil. So plants don't really need so many essential nutrients. They need about 16. We as humans need around 60 every time more minerals are being added. So our requirements are much higher than plants. And they will suck them up. They're in the soil and in the water, so they'll just suck them up even if they don't need them. So where are those minerals now? Well, they're stuck. So we've got about 90,000 dams worldwide, about 25,000 of them generate, oh no, sorry, I believe it's 2,500 generate electricity, but it's really just leaving the soil without enough minerals. So mineral depletion is really quick. Per acre, the plants suck up about 48 grams. And unless the minerals are returned as mulch or they're sprayed as well, the soil will not contain them. And it's just like having a blood clot, like an ischemic stroke, for example, because we're talking about, we're going to talk about brain functionality. So if you cut the supply to every cell, then they'll starve. Well, the same is happening, but we're cutting the supply from the root distributor, which is water that comes from the mountains, and it's filled with all these minerals. So pretty much almost everybody is deficient. It ranges between 92%, 95% according to statistics. And, everyone's looking for the best food, organic, but it's really not enough because there cannot be this such a high statistic, which virtually almost everybody is deficient. So there are different stages to this. First, the deficiencies start affecting cell metabolism, the transformation. Eventually, it gets a lot worse. You don't have enough body stock of vitamins and minerals. And then you start having these observational signs in behavior. The people that start coming into neurofeedback clinics, they've pretty much trained themselves through performance, through activity, through sports, through, constant performance and a performance directed society will deplete you. So it starts from being able to get to the nutrients, being able to transform them, and eventually at the last stages, you'll have all these social disturbances, all these observational behaviors that are being modified. So yes, behavior can and is influenced by abundance of minerals, vitamins, and other food factors, but it doesn't change your behavioral pattern because that's learned. But either way, replenishing the body will change your behavior, as in you'll be less anxious, you can get out of depression, this low energy state in the body, you just feel a lot better, you can concentrate more, etc. So how quickly do these body stock reserves deplete? Well, some are really quick, like B vitamins, thiamine, biotin. Some take a little bit more time, like vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, niacin, which is vitamin B3. Others, a lot more, like folate, or vitamin A, or vitamin B12. So something that is very typical as well in vegans is that they become very deficient in about, like 51 minerals, and that drives the body to produce a lot more connective tissue, and that starts surrounding even the bone marrow, so they can't produce enough red blood cells, as well as others. So that's just one example, but it can happen even if you're not a vegan, if you don't have the nutrients, right? It's just that vegans are highly at risk because they cannot access them through plants, and we'll get to that in further slides. Now, a primary nutritional deficiency is usually socially and technologically based. So food habits, if you have access to food fads, lack of nutritional information, sound information, because you can find information everywhere, right? It's the age of information. The thing is, most of it's quite useless. So refined foods, alcohol use, vaccines with heavy metals that chelate to these minerals, breastfeeding, all these impact your ability to be able to access those nutrients. This is just a chart where you can see also how the manufacturing, the storage, the transport starts depleting, starts breaking down all those vitamins, minerals, proteins, fatty acids, everything you require so your body can structure itself and function. Now, secondary nutritional deficiencies usually have biological causes. So you can absorb them or you cannot transform them after they are absorbed. So poor digestion, lack of stomach acid, which is also usually presented when you have depletion of certain vitamins and minerals, mostly minerals in this case. Now, bioavailability, which type of nutrients, in which way will they be absorbed? So for example, curcumin is a very potent antioxidant for the brain. If it's not in fats, it really can't be absorbed well. So you can eat a lot of curcumin extract, drink it or in whichever way, and you really don't get the benefits. So other anti-nutrients like phytic acid, oxalic acid, tannic acid, these are found in plants and they chelate, they bind to minerals in your gut. So then it's not available for your microbiome to really transform them and your intestinal villi to get it inside of your body. So certain drugs as well, like statin drugs which will affect CoQ10 production, which is very important for electron transport, energy from your cells, cholesterol metabolism, so you can't build up your brain, sex hormones and other types of hormones, myelin to protect, axons, and also increasing metabolic demand. If a woman's pregnant, during lactation, if during puberty, quick growth, increased physical activity, high demanding physical activity sports like basketball, soccer, tennis. So when it's cold, your body also has to use some extra resources to keep it warm. Nutrient imbalances, even taking too much magnesium. If it doesn't have enough calcium, then you have issues, right? So if you are eating high phosphorus diets like the carnivore diet, too much animal protein without enough calcium and magnesium, same thing. Becoming dehydrated, too much coffee, lactation, excessive sweating. So when you sweat, I made this this image with all of these different minerals, electrolytes, some amino acids, even though there are more, but which are very important for neurotransmitter function, glucose absorption, sending the blood where it has to go, energy transformation. This is an example of how you sweat out all those minerals that you require for transformation. And when you have, when it's really hot and you're sweating, this is going to be an issue. Prolonged sports, intense sports, same thing. Now, you can also have damaging to the intestinal villi. So gluten intolerance, you don't have to be a celiac. It starts becoming damaged at a slower pace, but you'll get the same results eventually. And it doesn't just have to be gluten, right? They're like what's called cellular mimicry, proteins that have sequences similar to other parts of the body, and your brain starts being attacked. Your your blood-brain barrier. It starts breaking down. So just a quick recap on the blockades we've seen up until now. If you don't have access to nutrients, which are very low in food sources and getting worse by a day, or they just don't contain it, more people, we're more every day. And there's a limited amount of area where food can be grown. So that's a major issue. Almost everyone is primarily deficient. So we can't build, we can't heal, we can't function without these nutrients. And high prolonged performance and beliefs are also metabolic drainers and will decrease your function. Now let's jump into neurofeedback and nutrition. I'm going to give it a special emphasis on the redox cycle, which is reduction and oxidation. It's burning, it's like energy production, as if we were talking about a furnace, but also protecting the surrounding structures and also keeping that burning at a controlled, stable rate. Now, why will these nutrients and antioxidants help the neurofeedback process, which is what we're really interested in? Well, brain waves will require high amounts of energy, and they require the nutrients for this energy to be produced, transformed, transported. Now, you increase oxidation, like some of the cases that we've seen in the lunch and learns, then you also require more protective antioxidants for neuronal defense, recycling, and you need to be able to clear out waste product. So oxidative stress, what does it mean? So you start getting damage. Where? Structural components mostly in the cell, lipids and proteins. Just like in that avocado, you can see the oxidized avocado. If you consume that, you're consuming oxidized fats, and that is dangerous. So it's not the type of fat per se. It does influence, but it's mostly if it has been oxidized or not. So there's a form of measuring this, the antioxidant capacity, which is oxygen radical absorbance capacity, which are ORAC values. So I added some example of really high components, extracts, or foods that contain these antioxidants. So curcumin is one of the highest ones. But the thing is, the challenge is how do you make it bioavailable, right? Cloves, cinnamon, they're high, but you can see a huge difference. What's the biological half-life? The time it takes for those carotenoids, which really are important for the brain, to exit the body, to be used up and exit. So you've got some that'll last, like beta carotene, 37 days, lycopene, 26 days, lutein, 76 days. And if you're physically active, you need more units. So something that's, daily consumption of 50,000 units is what is recommended, but it really does depend on your performance levels. So what's another boundary, another blockade to be able to absorb these antioxidants and building blocks? Well, plant cholesterol, stanols or sterols or phytocholesterol, it will impact your absorption. So it reduces very substantially your absorption of B-carotene. But in a population that is very deficient, these percentages, they are determinant on how you will be able to protect yourself. So B-carotene, also vitamin E is extremely important. It's actually the most important when we're talking about neurons. Also, if you consume more omega-3 fatty acids, you need to consume them with vitamin E, or they can go inoxidized or oxidized, and you need that defense at the same time. Now, the way to work around it is you need animal cholesterol instead of that type of plant cholesterol. So what is the function of these carotenoids? Well, for starters, the pigment seems to be able, it will have an impact of all that blue light that comes through your retina, through your eyes. So your eyes become protected. The rate at which you're collecting information, well, your body is processing visual inputs, it changes, right? And the more body fat that you have, because that's where it's stored in fats, the less carotenoid concentrations you will have. So it doesn't just protect your retina. This is a chart, pie chart, where you can see the distribution of these important antioxidants in your brain. I already mentioned that you require animal fat, zoo cholesterol, to be able to absorb them efficiently, right? But you can just see right here how you get the amount of antioxidants and how they are associated with subjective mild memory loss, and you start getting, gradual higher mild cognitive impairment, and it just keeps on going. So that's why you require them. One of the best ways to get them is not just in supplemented food. I mean, supplemented high concentrations in a bioavailable form, but also juicing. Juicing is very useful for this. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit of different dementias and how the deficiency impact or cause dementias like vascular dementia. You get, inflammation in the intima, you get obstructed arteries. And by using these different amino acids, vitamins, minerals, then you really repair your arteries. You protect it, all that tissue. Korsakoff's, right? It is very well known that you ingest a lot of alcohol and you start getting Korsakoff's, and it usually comes with Wernicke. So you get damage to the myelin sheaths, and you have a lot of free radical damage. So you want to be able to rebuild that and regain functionality. You need the structural components like zoo cholesterol, animal cholesterol, vitamin B1, vitamin B12, vitamin E to protect carotenoids, curcumin extract, selenium, which will mostly protect inside the cell before it reaches that outer part of the cell. Low vitamin B12, you get all this accumulation of methylmalonic acid. You get axonal neuropathies. This is usually the case. Hypochlorhydria, right? You don't have enough salt. You don't have enough iodine to produce thyroid hormone. B12, right? You got low stomach acid. You cannot absorb B12 orally. That's why the intramuscular injections are so useful. Now, you got enteritis, you get inflammation of your guts, right? And then you get that gut-brain connection issue. So elimination diets, like eliminating gluten, cow dairy, yeast, barley, right? I mean, you can also have reactivity to other forms of protein, but it's very less likely to have them, for example, with goat and sheep casein, which have another form. Barley, rye, oats, sesame, instant coffee brands through molecular mimicry, right? Now, neurofeedback associations, high amplitude beta muscle tension, using adaptogens to really help balance out those energy levels, reducing stress a little bit, this perceived stress, fatty acids to have enough components to rebuild. Choline would also be very useful. B vitamins with an emphasis on B6, for example. Taurine, arginine. These are all very useful for these cases. Low amplitude beta and high beta. So you get more energy, you get more nutrient oxidation. Oh, I'm sorry, low amplitude, you require more oxidative nutrients, but you also require more sleep to be able to produce ATP, which is the biofuel, that energy that is required to function and to build. You also decrease your physical activity to lighter types of activity, stretching, walking, but don't run marathons when you have these low energy states. High alpha, adaptogens. Some help you calm your mind, like you don't have these perseverant, repetitive cycling thoughts. 5-HTP, also very useful. So high theta, you get have glycogen issues, which is sugar starch. So B vitamins, minerals for glucose and glycogen uptake, minoxidil, tyrosine, which is very important for the insulin signaling cascade, get the sugar inside the cells. High delta, you have an increase in antioxidants. Well, you need an increase in antioxidants. Arginine and taurine are also very useful, and juicing, because that's a way to get concentrated forms of these antioxidants. Now, I don't recommend juicing the typical juicing approach. You do have to use certain vitamins or acids, like citric acid, and know how to combine them so you don't have the negative effect, which would be secondary nutritional deficiencies, not being able to absorb, that come from, phytic acid or tannic acid or all these different types of acids. Now, low delta, which is associated with degrading myelin, right? White matter lesions. So you increase the raw building blocks, cholesterol, you need the transformers, vitamin B1, B6, B12, you need the fatty acids, which are also structural components. They also impact your immune response. So you got less inflammation. Now, taurine, tyrosine. So even though those are amino acids that are not considered essential, low levels will impact, so supplementing with them, very useful. So in general, as well, having low global frequencies, just increasing oxidative minerals, vitamins, you need higher concentrations, and you also need a lot of sleep, and just more sleeping because you need to be able to have the energy and to rebuild. So I use these slides from Dr. Suter's presentations, where you can see, for example, you have sleep problems, have this increase in amplitude and slow waves. So you're pretty much not having this high yield energy to produce beta frequencies, as an example. Your light is also starts becoming an issue. You become sensitive to the light. So that's where carotenoids, vitamin A, are very useful.
And Yanik, just to give you a heads up, you've got 13 minutes till the top of the hour.
Okay, I'm almost done. Thank you, Rob.
No worries. Yep.
Okay, so glycogen reduction, it goes through stages. You you become depleted. After a certain time, you have the certain patterns. You're carrying the same lifestyle until eventually you have these high levels of slow waves, and you have very low levels of fast waves like beta. Okay, alpha, perseverant, busy mind, right? Adaptogens, very useful in these cases. Also, having enough thyroid hormone and high beta. So, you need enough antioxidants for this high oxidation, as well as being able to, tone down, calm down, use other frequencies to help, modulate and have less demand for your brain. So just to wrap up, how can you identify and avoid these blockades? Well, you can view high risk for deficiencies. Clients arrived after they have this prolonged depletion, high performance, physical performance, thinking a lot, kids going to school, getting through class, then going to 2-3 hours of physical activity. They will all be starved. That's an advanced stage of depletion. Supplementation is required, and even more in urban areas. The transport of food breaks down all these different nutrients, and they're not even in the soil to begin with when we talk about minerals, for example. So you need high bioavailable nutrients. That's a way to get around it. These low states, because if you have a damaged gut as well, then you need higher amounts, and you need the ones that are most absorbable, because you already have absorption issues. Now, initially reducing performance, the right building blocks and metabolizers, which are all those vitamins, minerals in the right form, and the right supplement without those fillers that impede your absorption. Eliminating and avoiding certain foods, like gluten. It's the best example you can have. And balancing those reduction oxidation cycles. So if you want to increase performance a little bit, and or you want to stabilize it, you also require your shield, everything that can protect your cells, your neurons, your your transport system, your arteries, your shielding from other environments, your blood-brain barrier. All this very, very important. So you can go into my webpage at phoenixprogram.com, and it's still in the making, but it'll be up in about 2 weeks' time. But it's really this type of focus where I'm providing the education and advising on how to really get to those optimal functional brain functioning states. And yeah, that's pretty much it, Rob. So we can open up the floor for questions, and I'll answer.
Yeah, perfect. Either Richard or Aaron will begin to unmute people. We have 30, it'll take them a minute or two, so just give us a moment. But one of the questions I have, I suppose, is when you think about all the nutrient depletions, and I've known about this for quite some time, if you buy foods that are labeled as organically grown, do you have any better sense of whether those foods have more of those nutrients or not?
They usually do. They usually have more antioxidants.
Okay.
But other than that, the minerals will be, maybe the soil won't break down other components like glyphosate, for example, which will affect the minerals, but either way, it won't be enough. And it really does depend on where it's grown.
So we all need to really think about supplementation at some point in time or another, depending on your system.
Yeah, it's just an artificial way, an artificial safe way to really make sure you're at least avoiding that primary deficiency. You're getting it to your
Yeah,
body.
I
Yanik, I
remember.
remember an
Go
old
ahead.
study, it's a big longitudinal study with a lot of subjects that said that the people who take vitamins don't have better health outcomes. How do you explain that?
Well, I'd have to look at the study, right? But for example, the pharmaceutical industry really doesn't like the vitamins. But there are some vitamins, for example, you can get them in a synthetic form like vitamin E, right? Which is known for to have these like contrary type of of outcomes. So there are different forms of vitamin E. So mixed natural tocopherols are different than just one form of a synthetic tocopherol, alpha tocopherol, for example. If you just have alpha tocopherol, which is one of them, you deplete a very important other form of vitamin E, which is gamma tocopherol. So they all have different roles. So proportions are very important. The quality of supplements are very important. When you also consider these studies, you really don't know if the person has issues to absorb, if we're talking about like fat soluble vitamins, if they don't have enough um, um, cholesterol, cholic acids, and being able to absorb them, right? So if you have, I mean, these are just some examples of how complex it is. But bioavailability, one component, proportions, another component, are those vitamins stored or are they already oxidized? Storage is very important. These are organic molecules. So I mean, that's how I can answer it,
Thank you, Yanik.
You're welcome.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm curious. We've been coached over the last 10 years or so to look at the hair analysis, and I'm wondering if that's part of what you do to do. Obviously, there's got to be an analysis as to what's missing, what's excessive. What's your thought about the hair analysis system?
I think it can be useful because it'll also provide pointers and proportions at a certain point in time between minerals. It'll help you be able to see if they're heavy metals. There are some that will always be low in the hair analysis, for example, like boron, which is so important because boron has a half-life of I think it's 21 hours. So unless you constantly supplement daily, you will have low levels. But I think that hair analysis is a useful tool, especially to know the amounts, the ratios between minerals. So other tests that I consider very important is the omega-3/6 index. That's also, to be able to look at different fatty acid proportions. So we're usually towards the omega-6 at a ratio to 20:1, which the healthy would be between a 1:1 and 1:3 ratio. And that will really, really be useful in knowing how your cells are building. And that's one that I recommend highly. But the way I look for these proportions are I use subjective reporting with clinical observable states of depletion, as well as body composition. That's another one, and social. So I go into the socioeconomic, are you the firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn? Is it a large family? Where did you grow? All these different components. So it provides a history. Any other questions?
How do you feel about fasting?
Fasting can be very useful, but it really does depend on where you're at. So if you're high glycemic and you have low, you don't have enough adipose tissue, you know, fats, I wouldn't recommend it. I recommend fasting after you have enough nutrients to be able to transform and rebuild your body. Fasting has some benefits that no supplementation can give you and no food can give you, because you need and depending on if it's you know, what you call intermittent fasting, which is just eating certain amounts of hours in a day, or if it's a prolonged fast, 24 hours to 72 hours, it'll have different benefits. Those will be most useful for high glucose levels, diabetics, and 5-day fasting mimicking diets are very useful to repair, you know, bring down old cells that are not working well, mitochondria, you know, the power plants, and produce new ones. But then you need high nutrients so you can maintain those new cells. But fasting is definitely an important component. I believe it is fundamental in health.
So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, is there an email you want people to have?
Well, they can just click on, you know, go to the my webpage, and it'll have options there, so they can just schedule an appointment, just see through the program, and if it fits for them and it's what they're looking for, they can just, you know, schedule an appointment. And in the meantime, they can just send me an email at Yanik, YANIK.Ruiz@gmail.com.
I see phoenixprogram.com is not up at all yet.
It's in the making. I mean, the designer has it. It's just that he's still it's gonna take like a week to get it up, but it'll be up there soon. So by the time the video is uploaded and everything, it'll probably be up.
I
And you
guess
know,
I'll just say, Yanik, that being able to have you go through some of my people with me has been very, very helpful. And I can see the differences that having them work their physiology issues out makes in my ability to help their brains optimize. So, you know, it seems sometimes the way I phrase it to people, I feel like I have the bigger view with the neurofeedback, where they fit in their lives, and then you provide the micro view from the cellular perspective of how to get things working better. It's very useful. It's been very useful for me and the few people that we've worked together on.
yeah, and having those two approaches, huh, Judy? We've done some good things. Yeah,
Yes.
they just change quicker if they have both, right? As opposed to just having one.
Yes, and I don't feel like I'm overstepping, because this is not my arena, and I'm hard pressed to advise people to take anything more than some of the simple supplements that are just designed to kind of get neurotransmitter production going. And so being able to say, here's a resource for you is wonderful, you know. So thanks.
Oh, thank you, Judy. It's been great working with you. Yeah, I think it's just so it's really so so gratifying to be able to see people change their lives, how they feel and everything. I mean, just like I did with myself. You know, that's why I really got into this, and it became my new self-chosen profession. So there's nothing like just being able to have everything you need and be able to choose and do whatever you want, right? And feel free enough to do it and have the energy. So just sharing that is by itself, it's the reward for me.
All right. Well, Yanik, thank you so much for taking the time today to give this presentation. For those that are still here with us, it will be posted probably by next Monday or Tuesday once Aaron and or Richard go through it and make sure everything is good. And if you have other questions, you know how to contact Yanik. So we appreciate your time, Yanik. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure.
All right. Bye, everybody.
We'll be back on Friday. Have a good
See
couple
you
of
Friday.
days.